I'm so glad to be here, and thank you, Christine, my dear friend. And I first of all just want to say that I understand that um, this is a sensitive topic, and I don't want it to feel super heavy. I want us to be able to just kind of take a breath together and meet this topic with compassion, especially self-compassion. Uh, I'm going to be talking about the dis-ease of depression. And in it, like not just eradicating it, not just getting it out of us, not just releasing it, but alchemizing it or transmuting it for our higher good. And there's a difference between, I mean, there's this whole movement about like rooting things out and all those things. And while that can be wise to do that, we need the experience gained from a lot of our dis-eases and our disconnections and separations in order to alchemize wisdom in the mind body. And so some of the things that I'm going to share with you today are very personal to me, things that I have learned over the years with not only in my personal work, but in my professional work, but in my family, which I'll talk about. So I really like this quote about depression. I think it really encapsulates what it is. It's a disorder, this is by Dr. John Crystal. It's a disorder of the spirit and the brain, but also the whole body. It's one of the most disabling conditions that we have in the world. So I have talked about depression in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, parts of Europe, all over the US, and really it's kind of this universal weighing down or a state of, you could even say it's not just about brain fog. It's not just about the clinical, things that you can go into the DSM and just list out all of the, which can be very helpful. But at its core, depression is a soul sickness. And this is where we don't want to judge ourselves because all of us have degrees of soul sickness just because we live in this three-dimensional reality and it's really hard to be here. And there's a lot at play and there's a lot underfoot and there's a lot of things that we need to manage around us. And so we are like sane souls in a crazy world, if that makes sense. And so we're trying to make sense of it, and it can create a lot of dissonance in the mind body. So depression, it goes beyond sadness. It's inflammation throughout the body. So we're talking, one of the first things that we see is a disruption in our energy flow. So there's a diminishment of let's just say, regenerative energy. Sometimes we can get this brain fog where we can't focus, we lose concentration, there's a loss of feeling. A lot of people report, and this is where when my depression shows up as a dysthymic, where it's just this numbness. It's kind of just my way of coping with what's going on around me. And so I've had to, from a very, very, very young age, we're talking preschool age, to self-soothe and sort of numb a lot of the really intense emotions that I was feeling. There's usually sleep disruptions, intrusive thoughts. A lot of times people that are in like the clinical phase of depression where it just feels like the whole body is heavy with this dense energy, there is a diminishment in the things that you used to love to do. So a diminishment in the activities that used to light you up no longer draw you because you just don't have the energy. You don't have the get up and go, if you will. You're gotta get up and go, got up and went. And so there's a tendency to isolate and to just kind of block people away. Now, I need to say also that spiritual awakening can mimic depression. When you're recalibrating and up leveling, let's just say, it can feel like depression. That's why we can't judge this. This is why depression is what everybody is going to cycle through on different spectrums throughout their lives. So also know that when you're feeling these feelings, and usually it's linked to feelings of separation. That's why there's a tendency to isolate, that you're feeling separation on a spiritual level and on a physical level. and on a social level. So there's this like regrouping that your body wants you to do. And it's really your mind body's way of saying time out, stop, feel. So we're going to get into that a little bit. And what that actually means, like, but I can't underscore this enough. Spiritual awakening and up-leveling your consciousness and expanding your consciousness can sometimes mimic the signs of depression. I know that I have certainly felt that way. I want to talk to you a little bit so you just kind of know where you come from and why this is a topic that's just so close to my heart. Epigenetically speaking, I have massive amounts of mental illness, and especially bipolar and depression and addiction running through my DNA on both sides of my family. So my dad has a sister who took her life when she was 32, and she was bipolar, and in her suicide letter, she asked my parents to raise her 3-year-old son. So my youngest sibling was raised as my brother. That was when I was 21 years old that she passed away. My mother, on my mother's side of the family, she's had several cousins who've unfortunately taken their lives. Lots of high creativity on both my mother's and father's side. With high creativity, sometimes there can be a melancholy or, that bipolar where you're like trying to mitigate the states of duality. And there's lots of implications for that from a consciousness perspective. But from a familial patterning perspective, this was something I really picked up on very, very young. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and all of them, except my one sister, Robin, have been diagnosed bipolar at one point. And so we kind of joke in my family about my parents creating a genetic storm with their combined DNA. And I'm sure some of you, a lot of you probably, are also bridge souls who are starting to see these patterns and starting to notice that maybe like you're the one who's going to observe the pattern and infiltrate and come back to let's all heal the system. Let's heal our bodies first, and then the systems and the these patterns that have been running rampant generationally in our DNA for a long time, and they're kind of reaching a crescendo point. That's why we're all feeling this density and heaviness. So we can't judge it because it didn't start with us. Likely a lot of these symptoms of depression, like I said, mimic kind of the state of the earth right now. And so we're kind of picking that up empathically. But in my family, one of the crescendo points, I guess you could say, or where it hit the true crisis point was the death of my sister, Shauna. I'm not going to go into the details of how, what, when, where, why. I don't want to trigger anyone. But this is a beautiful sister, 2 years younger than me, who was at the time of her death a mother of 5. And her children were very young. They were ages 2 to 12 at the time of her passing. And she was also bipolar. And she basically was on over a dozen different medications to manage her symptoms of bipolar. And so she really was not in the driver's seat from a soul perspective. She was really not, I guess you could say, in a space of receiving some holistic options, although she had been, like her husband had taken her to the top treatment professionals and facilities, only for her to grow worse and worse. And so I remember when this happened, which was in 2005. So it's coming up almost on 20 years. It'll be 20 years this next year, that I remember just feeling this, like, it stops here. Like this pattern stops here, because at this time I have children. Of course, she has children. It just felt like this mama bear chemistry rising up in me going like, this is going to end. And I don't know how. I mean, I do have a traditional psychology degree. Even before my sister's passing, I had worked in clinical settings. At the time of her death, actually, I worked at an addiction recovery center. And Shauna herself had struggled with addiction as well. So I started to not only see that this was happening up so close to home with my dear sister, but also in these treatment centers that I worked at. And I won't go into, I know I'm preaching to the choir on this. There's some really beautiful treatments out there. And there's also what we know now is that there can be this recidivism or this relapsing or this chronic nature to depression and to a lot of mental health issues that are not being addressed with our traditional remedial treatment models. And so one of the things we see is this diminishment of hope. Like there's no hope. And that's a very desperate place to be. That's a very dark place to be. Like, this is not going to change. This is going to go on forever. I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I want to infuse some hope. Just having shared all that heaviness with you, let's just take a breath, because there is hope. And there, in the almost 20 years since my sister's passing, I mean, we have broken a lot of, transmuted, I should say, a lot of these patterns. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you has been a massive learning curve for me, just to look into the eyes of people who are suffering all over the world. To some of my children, I don't know why there's stuff going on the screen. There's this little green thing. But, you know, to be able to support people who feel that sense of hopelessness has really been a great passion of mine, including myself. So while I don't have a diagnosis of bipolar, and while I wouldn't say I've ever, I'm sure I have had clinical depression in times past, but mostly, like I said, my coping mechanism from an emotional mental standpoint has been dysthymic depression, which is a chronic low-grade depression which persists for at least 2 years. And it became my baseline state as a child and adolescent and moving into young adulthood, to the point where I didn't even know that I had it until a very astute psychiatrist in Stanford, prior to my serving a mission for my church, diagnosed me with it. So we are going to dive into this beautiful energy of hope. Hope. And I would imagine a lot of you are hope bearers yourselves as bridge souls, that you've probably yourself walked through a lot of these feelings of hopelessness, anxiousness, all of the symptoms. But my big why, as I'm sure for many of you, this is my family, these are my kids, and my husband. Jeff and I have been married, it'll be 30 years next year. And I have 3 young adults, and then those 2 younger ones, they're adopted. They came to us through 2 separate private adoptions. And guess what? Both of their birth moms were diagnosed bipolar. So this has been a theme in my life. So I always tell people, your mess is your message. And by the way, I have very close relationships with our birth mothers, and it's just such a beautiful sacred story that I won't go into, other than to say that when your mess is your message, all you have to do is look around and see what you've kind of collected. Like, what are the patterns showing up around you of seeming dysfunction? And knowing the paths of the birth mothers of my 2 adopted children, Eli and Emma, I can see how they are also transmuting patterns, but it just looks very, very different than the way that I am, or the way that a lot of people that I know are, because they're just very much doing it under the radar. So another piece to this hopefulness is to find your why. Find, not just like, I want to help humanity, or I want to, like, get very, very dialed in and specific around what's calling to you, what's in front of you, and why and whom you are being called to bless, teach, serve, and help to transmute these patterns. We can't fix, save, or heal anyone. That's not our job. I tried for lots of years with different loved ones, but I'm learning now that when I do the work in my body, that is how I'm going to help transmute the patterns. It's not what I'm doing externally as much as it is what I'm doing inside of myself. And it took me a long time to figure that out. So again, I'm preaching the choir here with you guys. You all know that this is our model for getting well. This is what generally has not been, this is not something that I learned getting my psychology degree. Certainly didn't learn much stuff around the holistic space, but we are multi-sensory beings, and therefore we require a multi-sensory approach to getting well. And what that means is, well, especially with depression, because as I mentioned earlier, it's a whole body, whole soul dis-ease, or state of separation. So we cannot compartmentalize healing. And one thing I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this before, but I just really want to bring this part in, is that you have three main neural processing centers in your body, and they're called the three brains: your mind, your heart, and your gut. And so when we're talking about dis-ease, it's just disconnection or a disruption in flow. So all healing is flow. And when your heart is not communicating with your mind, and your mind is not listening to your heart, and your heart is not listening to your gut, and your gut can't communicate to your heart, and there isn't that like flow. I like to look at it as the heart in the center, looping up to the mind, looping back down to the heart, looping down to the gut, up to the heart. So like a figure eight, that the heart is like the apex or the center point. When those centers are not in flow or in deep listening, let's just say, then we start to experience dis-ease and feelings of separation. So your mind, your brain, your mind brain, this is where 90%, and this is, well, yeah, we already know this, like your whole body is your mind, your whole like body is your subconscious mind. But at the same time, this processing center in your brain is trying to make logical sense of what's going on with the rest of your body. And it takes up an enormous amount of energy when we're in our heads to try to figure this out. Like, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? What's happening? Because it's just trying to keep you safe. Your heart, and this is where it gets really fascinating. There's a lot of stuff on heart math and heart consciousness and thinking in the heart and all those things. But your heart brain, it is actually sending more, there's more neural pathways running from your heart to your head than the other way around. We tend to think that the brain is just sending all these messages all the time in your head. But what's actually happening is your heart is intuitively picking up what's going on around you, and it's consistently sending a message to the mind. Feel this, know this, think on this, contemplate this, reflect on this, notice this. And then your gut, especially for women who have that sacral chakra, womb wisdom energy, and have a womb chakra too, actually. But we really, like if you lived in a, let's just say Japan or China or something, and you had depression and you went to go see a traditional medical doctor, the first thing that they would ask you is, how is your gut? How is your, because they consider that the second brain. They actually there's more neurotransmitters by far in the lining of your digestive tract than there are in your head, in your brain. So all this chemical interplay and exchange and energy is happening, and there's a lot going on under this iceberg that, underneath your eyes, behind your throat. It's just, there's so much going on throughout your body in an attempt to help you receive flow. So these three neural processing centers are really trying to work for you and help you reach homeostasis, help you to feel good. We aren't like here to suffer. Well, we kind of are. But once we awaken to the fact that suffering is optional, and that we can command, literally through our heart, our mind, and our gut, that we can command our mind body to feel good through a lot of the things that you've been learning the last couple of days, especially as it relates to your deservedness and your worthiness and your acceptance that you deserve to feel good. And I am here to tell you, especially with women, I've noticed this, there are some deep intergenerational thought patterns around not feeling worthy to be well, and that this life is all meant for us to suffer. And that's a lot of the mother martyr energy that we see. But your brain, you're wired for health. You're wired to feel good, and you have these portals in your body that are trying to help that you achieve that and feel that. I'm not going to go into these in detail, but the latest research is just unequivocal that a lot of the heaviness and density that we feel through the heaviness of depression is based on early childhood trauma, or trauma in general, especially early childhood, the ways that we coped, the ways that we try to navigate our environments. And so it produced these feelings of safety that these neural networking and the chemistry was all about trying to keep you safe. And so it can put us in these states of fight or flight or freeze or fawn, which is so natural, but it's also very chemically charged. So when you are feeling, when you're in a depressed state, let's just say, what happens is your body has higher levels of corticosteroids, stress hormones, and those stress hormones and steroids, they block serotonin. They block your feel-good. Physiologically, this is what's happening. They're blocking your feel-good chemicals. They're blocking the flow, because remember, all healing is flow. And so it's literally like creating density and chunks of blocked energy that isn't communicating with different parts of your body. That's all it is just a disruption in chemical communication from a physiological standpoint. So these receptor sites on the surface of your cells, they're like little Y-shaped antennae that are trying to solicit and scan for everything that your cells need. And they can start to become numb or desensitized. And a lot of times with some of the prescribed SSRIs and whatnot, they can actually that actually makes it even sometimes worse. That it will take away the sting or the dark thoughts, but it will still create feelings of numbness. So what we want to do so sometimes those medications are necessary to keep people out of the funk, is to create more flow in the body, so that those receptor sites can be reignited, that the divine spark can be put back into the body. Because it's not, as I said, it's not just happening in your head. It isn't even just happening in those three main neural processing centers, the mind, heart, and gut. It's happening on the whole body and all of your cells. So let's just talk a little bit. I mentioned this earlier that, like, we're all like trying to navigate this environment, and there's a lot of stuff on law of attraction and all the things that ultimately, like, we can blame ourselves for a lot of the things that happen because but actually what's happening, like, we don't actually know any better. That's really what's happening. We're innocent. We have all this subconscious programming come up. So the way that we're perceiving and seeing what's going on is not actually based in reality. It's distorted. And if you ever any of you study A Course in Miracles, one of the biggest take-home messages of A Course in Miracles is that a miracle happens when there's a change in perception, a change in the way that you're seeing what's happening. So it's almost like with depression, you have these sunglasses on that just dim a little bit of the joy and power and beauty and passion of life, and everything seems bleak. When you have that miracle or that change in perception, the distortion and the scales fall away from the eyes. And so you have these new glasses, and you start to see who not only you are, because that's where it starts first, is to turn those glasses inward, that you are not the dark thoughts, that you are not the disease, that you are not the separation, that you are not all the labels that have been put on you since you were this high, that you are actually a divine being who's having this very dense experience because it's going to help you evolve. So when you put those kind of glasses on, everything changes, and that's the miracle, is that really subtle change in perception, or maybe not so subtle. And that's part of what awakening is about. And that's part of the reason that depression is literally an initiation or a precursor into your spiritual awakening, because you have to, everything's just kind of ramping up. So you put those new glasses on. And I'm going to show you some ways that you can do that. Here's how you know that you're getting well. All right. And first of all, I love this, that bliss is hardwired. We are hardwired for states of bliss. We have feel-good chemicals and anandamide and theobromine and all these things that are in our bodies that are allowing us to feel blissful. And a lot of times we will dampen that. So how do you let that flow, right? It is a state of allowing. It is a state of openness, literally at the cellular level. So remember, I told you there's these Y-shaped receptor sites on the surface of every cell that you have, sometimes 1 million of them on the surface of a cell, and they're scanning and soliciting for what you need. And when those receptor sites are open, well, they're going to be open whether you like it or not, but when you are open and you see yourself as a receptor and an antenna and a channel really for that bliss, that divine I am, then what starts to happen is there's a natural integration process that ensues, and it's putting you into a natural state of order inside. And that reordering can make you really tired. we talk a lot about a healing crisis. And it's like an oxymoron, right? Healing crisis. It's because sometimes you have to go into deep rest. It's a play on the word depressed. When you are feeling depressed, most of us just push through it and go, 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 go. But it's a call for you to go into deep rest, to cocoon, to self-nourish. And then what starts to happen is that movement organically happens and the flow starts to take place, and it's all happening divinely and intelligently without you having to do anything. This is a new way of looking at how you actually meet depression with openness, a teach me, show me sort of surrender place. And that brings me to my teaching model that I have used for a number of years. This is my creation compass. And for me, it is a visual model of how we heal and create. And at our north point there, our north star is love. We all want love. We all want to give and receive love. We all want power or to become empowered. So we receive love and we receive power as preparatory to us giving it. So I used to say, like, the left side of this compass is very feminine. It's again, that Y-shaped receptor model, that we are literally opening ourselves to receive love, to receive power, or to become empowered. And there's a divine order to this. We connect to the divine, which connects us to ourself, which then connects us to others. But right in the middle here is what I really want to highlight, and that is center point there is surrender. And some people hate this word. It's a trigger word for me too. Because what does it even mean? We hear about it a lot, but all it means is to open and go into deep rest, to shut everything out and go deeply, deeply within. And because we're so used to, or the program in the past has been to swallow or push down when something feels uncomfortable, our natural inclination is to push it down. And that can create a deep pression of these unwanted emotions. I've used this quote for years. I love it so much. The body sheds the tears the eyes refuse to shed. It's very true that the way we heal is to feel. That's it. And if we can't go into deep rest and we keep avoiding the emotions that we didn't want to feel by deeply pressing them down in our bodies, that is what creates the density. We can't blame ourselves for this. We can't go into self-judgment or the inner critic, because this was a coping mechanism we probably had as toddlers, babies, and even in our mother's wombs. This was how we try to navigate and adjust to the waters we were swimming in, literally. So now we know better. Now we know that there are deep pressions. There are impressions in our mind body that require us to open ourselves so that we can feel them, so that they can be healed. That's the great invitation. I came up with this once when I was, anyway, I won't give too much context. The lack of healthy expression leads to suppression, which leads to repression, oppression, and eventually, you probably know, depression. So what does this mean? Well, systems, those systems of oppression, we have been oppressed, all of us, through systems and institutions that silenced us or told us we were wrong, whether it was school or religion or the government or families or whatever, like, to where feeling became dangerous and expressing from our heart out through our throat, because the highway of emotion between the heart and the mind is the throat. If we can't express, then what happens is we get depressed. And we're seeing multiple generations of women, especially with autoimmune and thyroid issues and all kinds of things, because we haven't had an outlet to express ourselves in healthy ways. And if we were oppressed through systems or our environment, we turn that. This is the difference between how depression expresses with females versus males. Males will project that oppression outward, and women typically, we will take that inside. We will turn it in on ourselves. For instance, if we couldn't express anger in healthy ways, we turn that anger in on ourselves, but oftentimes men will project the anger outward. But you can reach a point in your life, which I definitely did right before I turned 50, almost 6 years ago, where I'm like, I'm getting sick. I have got to find a way to get this out, to get this to flow. I was having multiple health problems. I was having a spiritual crisis. All these things were culminating. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've been teaching about this for years. Now the rubber's really going to hit the road here. How am I going to manage this? And how I'm going to be able to ground myself so that I can express in healthy ways and so that I can start to feel better. And I had to go through a major deconstruction process to do that. But really, ultimately, what it came down to is if I feel inspired by something, whether it's a thought, an emotion, an intimation that I need to speak up when I see injustice, or something that's being taught that isn't healthy, if I don't express it, this is literally how most of us are wired, that we will become depressed because it's just further swallowing down what wants to come out. And that is just a temporary state. It doesn't have to define who we are, what we are. Absolutely not. Remember, you aren't a depressed person. You aren't depressed. You have depression in you. You're divine. You are sacred. You're having a sacred journey. And if you're experiencing depression, the key is to not internalize it and make it about, I'm just a depressed person. That's who I am. That's my genes. That's how I express. No, 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 no. That's what you're experiencing. And you may have depression in you as density, but it does not define who you are. Not even close. One of my favorite teachers in this space of addiction and trauma information is Dr. Gabor Mate. Many of you maybe follow him. Self-suppression, he says, is a form of physiological self-annihilation. It's a very, very powerful statement. Most of his work has focused on childhood trauma, and how he says the worst kind of trauma there is this complex chronic trauma where you chronically over time diminish your authenticity in order to keep the peace around you. In other words, chronically not being able to be yourself over time and chronically not being able to authentically express yourself over time is the most complex and painful forms of trauma. So a lot of times we think of these deep, dark crimes and all these things that happen to people, and yes, those are heavy and dense, and those are horrific and whatever. But there's this really, really tricky kind of trauma that's even more powerfully felt in the mind body, and it's not being yourself, not expressing yourself. I find that new science and new research around this to be absolutely fascinating. So let's look at the brain and how we actually open up these feel-good portals, because your senses are your feel-good portals in your body. And all of your 5, 6 senses, your 6th sense is your feeling or intuition, but all of your senses have a physical and a spiritual pathway. So the spiritual pathway of sound is deep listening. The spiritual pathway of sight is envisioning or seeing something in your mind's eye. The spiritual pathway of taste is to speak, is to use this energy through the throat chakra and the mouth. The spiritual pathway of touch is to nurture, and I would say all of these should be in first person, like nurturing yourself, sensing yourself. The spiritual pathway of smell, which we'll get into, is probably your most powerful because it's your God sense, it's your I sense. And so making this first person and say, I speak, I envision, I listen, I sense, I nurture myself first. This is a depiction of the brain's limbic structures. And you can see that almond-shaped little center point there. Well, I'm going to hover my cursor over it. This amygdala, the only way that you can your amygdala is kind of your affairs center in your limbic structures. And all of these, by the way, are all part of your deep, deep unconscious, subconscious. But this amygdala is responsible for like the fight or flight. It's a really, really tricky place to access physiologically, especially with medications. The only way that you can access the amygdala directly is through smell. And your sense of smell is about 10,000 times more complex than all of your other senses. And so I'm a smell person. I love aroma. I'm an aromatherapist, and I was always really interested in how, when people snort things, like cocaine or whatever, like, what is that actually doing? And why is this like nose here? It's like an extension of your brain just sitting on the outside of your body. It's the spiritual pathway of that is to smell. Like, have you ever heard the phrase, I smell a rat? It's kind of like that, but in a good way. So we can literally smell or sense vibration and frequency and light and dark and all of the spectrums that are being presented and assaulted through our senses. So we'll get back to that in a minute. But I just wanted to highlight that because we are multisensory beings, we do require a multisensory being well, and I think that that's one of the biggest deficits in our treatment models today. My sister, I have a sister a year older than me, was also diagnosed bipolar. She's since had her diagnosis rescinded by 2 different doctors, and she's okay with me sharing this, but she's been, over the years, had been admitted to psychiatric facilities, as has my sister who took her life. And I would visit them in these places. And one of the things Tanya, my older sister, said was, Cherie, it's like all I wanted was something of nature, like in that cold, sterile room where they take everything away from you. And she's like, if I had an essential oil to smell, or if I had a flower, or if I could go outside in the grass, like it was just devoid of all of that sensory richness and stimuli that can be so important for us to heal. So our senses are the feel-good portals that God has given us for us to be well. So I'm going to just dip into thoughts really quick and dip out of it really fast, because this is where people go into massive self-judgment. And I'm really sensitive to that because I've done it myself, and that's why I see it in other people. But all emotions is just free-flowing chemicals throughout the body that are creating sensations. And the etymology, or the originating piece to this is they're often triggered by our thoughts and perceptions. So remember I said, like, when you're in a depression, you're like wearing sunglasses and everything just looks darker, and then you take the sunglasses off and you're like, oh my gosh. So we're really shooting for a shift in perception. That should be the goal when we're talking about these really deep-seated intergenerational patterns and traumas that we've experienced that are probably built up in our bodies as calcified emotion that can weigh us down and depress us. So when we go into that place of deep rest, we start to feel the sensations. We start to feel the emotions, and it isn't comfortable, not at all. So this is how it works. You have a thought, and your hypothalamus in your limbic structures is all happening intelligently without you even having to think about it. But you have a thought, and that hypothalamus releases neuropeptides throughout your whole body. And those neuropeptides attach to one of those eye-shaped receptors on your cell. And so when it does, it gets into the cell, it creates a molecule. And so that's what a lot of like Dr. Candace Pert's work has gone into, like molecules of emotion and how powerful our conscious thoughts are, especially even our unconscious thoughts, that we have all this neuropatterning. If something happens and we make a judgment about it. But when we have negative thought patterning that didn't start with us, a lot of it is how we were programmed, a lot of it is how we saw coping mechanisms growing up, but it creates a toxic biochemistry in the body. I know you guys already know this. I find this really interesting. Christine, you might have been the one that shared this with me, or somebody that I was involved when I was really looking at this like whole body issue with depression. Look at how depression, it's right here at the bottom. This is Kirlian photography. It looks at how energy is circulating in the body. The scientific field of emotional research is really growing. Science is now able to measure where emotions are felt in the body. And this is a study by the Academy of Science that shows how and where these emotions are felt. You can look at anxiety and fear, and they're almost identical. You see that? Depression and sadness are a lot alike, but you can see there's some anxiety in that red there. So I'm showing this to just further drive home the point that depression is felt through the entire body. But what really makes me sad is this blackness here in the center of our hearts. It's like a vacuum. It's like a void. But here's the upside. You have to go into the void to heal. I'm literally getting full body chills on this. There's no other way to deeply heal without going into the void. And the void is different for all of us, but the void, or still point, or quantum, I guess you could say that the center of all is the void. So this is how depression can be a gift in many, many ways, not only for freeing, your generations and ancestral lines, but to develop absolutely deep, deep empathy for others who are going through it and for all of humanity. So when you go into the void, sometimes you can go into what we call the ocean of suffering, which is that state of hopelessness, where you not only are tapping into your own depression and your family lines, but the consciousness is taking you into humanity's collective suffering. And for those of us who are empaths, man, that can feel hell's a heavy. So we want to just acknowledge that this void is a teacher. When we go into deep rest into the void and we have supports with us, it's how we get to the heart of it. It's how we get right to the center, is to go into it, not run around it, but meet it and say, hi, I'm here, I'm listening now. And I'm going to go past that in a minute, but what does a healthy person do? This is the grand key to healing, is to, and I wouldn't even say a healthy person, I would say, what does healthy me do? What would healthy me do right now to feel better? And what do I need to give myself right now in this moment, not tomorrow, not, whatever, thinking in the future, but bringing it into present. What do I need to give myself? Remember that model of receiving and giving. So once you've received this, once you're in a state of openness and receptivity and you're receiving, then your body wants to all of a sudden go into a doing. And we have to just do the grand timeout and say, okay, I will. And then we get out our notebook and we write down all the inspiration we're getting of what we're being called to do with this void, with this darkness, with this density, with this heaviness. And then what do I need to give myself as a support to feeling all these really heavy feelings I haven't felt in so long? You are a spiritual being who requires spiritual food, but you have this physical body. And sometimes we want to bypass that physicality and go straight into the transcendence. Well, guess what? I love ascension models. I think they're very motivating. I'm a Capricorn, so I love to achieve things. I'm like, let's ascend, let's achieve the ascension. But guess what? We're being called to right now. Ascension. To go down and in, not up and out. To go down, down, down into the recesses of the middle of us and ask what we need to do to feel well. What we need to feel well. So let's look at these. This is where I'm going to go into these 4 pathways. And this is from a depression standpoint. I know there's a lot of pathways that we can take for many, many different things. And this works for anything really, but especially with depression. The first one is fast, easy, free, the most readily accessible thing, because it's you're being breathed, by the way. You might as well just surrender to that fact that you're not controlling your breath. Well, you can, only to an extent, but a lot of times we hold our breath and that creates disruption of flow in the body. So whenever you start to feel tension in that deep rest mentality, you say, oh, I need to breathe. Spirit rides on the breath. If any of you have ever studied yoga or the pranayama and all of the associated, it's science, it's yogic science, it's body science, it's spirit science, that the spirit rides on the breath and spirit creates flow. It's a very deep mystery in a body and we don't really completely understand it. But when we've been holding and holding and holding and have all this tension and all this density, and we're kind of bracing ourselves against our environment, there's no space for flow and openness. So the breath allows for the openness. The breath is like a prayer in and of itself. The breath can be a petition to for you as the master and commander of your body to send breath and healing flow and activating healing mechanisms, your inner activated healing, intelligent healing mechanisms in your body, simply by directing your breath and simply by deeply resting into your breath. So that's the first one. And I know it's emphasized a lot, but it's also highly overlooked, and highly underrated. Okay. Or overrated. I don't know how to say, if I'm saying that right. So the invitation is always to go within. It's always to go, I call it the queendom within, which is just like your inner castle, your inner sanctum. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within. I like to call it the queendom for all the feminine here, but it's just like, all right, I'm in. I'm in the castle. I'm in the queendom. I get to choose who comes in or out. I'm in my inner throne. I'm resting, and that is deep rest. And you could even be on, like, you don't have to be on a throne. You could be on a queenly bed. I don't know. The point is to get within and go within. And that happens through breath and closing your eyes. The second one is nourishment. And I'm not talking just about physical nourishment, although a lot of people will run to that one first. We do need physical energy to feel spiritually well. They're very much married. But deep nourishment isn't just about what you're eating, but it is a metaphor. Eating is a metaphor for all the other things that we're putting to our body and swallowing and accepting. And some of it is literal spiritual junk food. The messages we're getting, they're not always nourishing. And I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing, by the way, because spiritual bypassing means I'm only going to feel love and light. I'm only going to let love and light in. Well, you can't do that because everywhere you go and everything you turn on your screen and anywhere you go, any environment, you're going to be called to nourish. And it's not just a one and done or one off. It's like constant nourishment, constant nourishment. So being mindful of like, okay, well, if the grand key to my healing is to give my body what it needs, what does it need right now? Does it need a Snickers bar? Well, and I think it wants a Snickers bar, but I think what it really needs is deeper nourishment. So then we get to deeply listen to ask our body what it needs. And you all know this probably, but like your gut and all of the neurochemicals that are produced in your gut are the key to you feeling well. So if you have an inhibited, let's just say if your gut biome isn't built up or you have constipation, that's an inhibition of flow. Again, like all healing is flow. It's what's being stopped up. Usually it's something on the emotional level. So then we just go into deep rest. We breathe. We get our body something nourishing, a tool that we provide for our bodies, whether it's an essential oil, a nourishing snack, a bath, whatever we do to get in. But with that gut biome, the gut is controlling, really, or influencing might be a better word, how you feel 24/7. So there are people that specialize in this kind of stuff. I have certainly done my research on this. I know how important probiotics are, good digestive enzymes. But if you're truly experiencing like a chronic gut issue, you need to see somebody who studies functional medicine, like a practitioner or an energy worker, somebody that has like an integrative approach, who has a medical background, but is also looking at the whole body system. So when you have low gut function, you have low mood. They very much mirror each other. So that nutritional rehab. Now this one is the hardest one, and I really wish there was another way, but we are right now on our planet, we are being called to feel the feelings that our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, and so on could not feel. And it's been said that healing happens when one person in that generational pattern is willing to feel what all of the ancestors before them were not. So the kind invitation is to just lay down and let yourself feel. Lay down and let yourself feel. That's all there is to do. And your body will reorder itself. There's probably a lot going on spiritually behind the scenes when we allow this to happen with angels and whatnot. I don't understand those mysteries, but when it comes to you and your connection to a creator and your connection to source and how you allow yourself to be anchored and safe while you are processing and feeling makes all of the difference. It's just this surrendered space of like, I'm going to feel it now. So whatever arises, feel it. Stop and go into deep rest and feel it. Because remember, before that, we're grabbing the nourishment, we're grabbing the breath, and those are safety mechanisms that will anchor and ground you so that you can do the deep work to feel and space hold for yourself. Or maybe someone else needs to space hold for you. And the last one is to move the energy. And there's a lot of ways that we do this because that density lives in the body and because there's a lot of stuck energy, it wants to move so that the flow can happen. So dance breaks, moving, energy, sound bowls, crystal bowls, whatever. Sound is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way to move energy. Obviously moving your body through yoga and all of those things. Walking can be really, really cathartic. The point with all of these is that proactivity around creating an environment of light. How do you bring light? How do you bring quantum solace through light into your mind body? That's the invitation. So I won't go into all of the science around this. I know we have to wrap up.
Yeah.
But the piece that I wanted to really bring home, and I was going to make it another pathway, but I'm like, oh no, you know, when you start to go into creation mode, you heal, especially the soul sickness of depression. It's like the kryptonite to feeling depressed. It's like you will become lit up literally with light. When you start to put your own pain over in a sacred space and say, I'm going to come back to you, but right now I need to break out, you know, I need to voice, I need to visualize and see things in my mind's eye. I need to feel. And then when I do those things, I now can actualize or manifest what it is that I really want to feel. And this is a very empowered place. This is how I believe I was able to transmute depression through my own way in my body, and all of the bipolar and addiction and all the stuff running and rampant in my gene pool is I was able to learn tools of creation. And so part of that olfactory piece became really, really important to me, using essential oils. And being able to just stop everything, getting out of production mode, and really understanding that, like, and I won't go into the science of this olfactory other than to say that when you are, I want to give you this really juicy scientific tidbit and then I'll wrap up. When you are flailing, when you are triggered, when you are really, really like in your monkey brain, you really need to access the amygdala. So have something, as I would say, especially like an essential oil that you can just grab at the ready and smell on the run. Close your eyes and do those things. Breathe, nourish, feel, and then of course you just move into like moving the body. Minimizing distractions is massive, because remember, whatever you're taking in to your light receptors through your eyes, ears, smell, etc., is reprogramming you on a daily basis. So you want to make sure that what you're putting into your receptors is actually a high frequency. And then of course, powering yourself up to receive through the apex of a surrendered state. I wanted to offer you, as I kind of round this out, I published this book in 2006, the year after my sister took her life. And this is now, I sold hundreds and hundreds, I think almost 1,000 copies, but then I was just like, oh, it's old. I need to write another book. So even though like it's got classic universal application, so I made it an ebook instead of getting it reprinted. So you can get that for free if you just go to my website, CherieBurton.com. And under CherieBurton.com, there's a little tab like in the nav bar, tools that transform, and you can find this right there at the very beginning, just a free digital download. It's just this really, for me, I wanted to create something small, concise, like a guidebook versus like a whole text around all the research and stuff. So this is very research, but it's also like the lived experience of getting you on those 4 pathways and bringing you into a place of homeostasis for you or a loved one. And I'm also offering this 22-day depression cleanse for $22, which you'll also find on my website under I think it's under tool. It might be under work with me, but it might be under tools that transform. But I know it's on the homepage. It's like number 1 or 2 on my homepage, CherieBurton.com. This is a 22-day, so just over 3 weeks. So to literally give yourself a reboot. There's an optional depression detox diet, which I hate the word diet, but when you take the course, you'll understand why I'm using the word diet, because you're literally starving the toxicity out of your body. But it's a lot of people have had massive breakthroughs with this. And so I was originally just using it with my clients, and then I made it a course, and it's only $22, and it's super meaty, but super super simple and practical, because when you're all over the map with your body and your mind, and you don't need complexity, like you'll shut down. A confused mind doesn't act. And so my goal was like, I'm going to give you a baby step every day for 22 days. And it only takes you 22 minutes a day to do all of the things, like the kind of like you build an emotional emergency kit, and I teach you how to do that. I give you a 5-minute neurosensory processing method that you use every day, which does include breath and visualization and all the sensory aspects. So I would invite you to go check this out on my site. I have a landing page where you can read more about it. But I'm really clear that the reason I'm on the earth, one of the reasons I'm on the earth, is to be a guide for those who are literally suffering with familial depression. And because I've lived it in my body and didn't know I was living with it, when I got out of the numbness and the dysthymia and I experienced that bliss state, which we can't ever subsist in, but like when I was able to tap that, I can't even tell you like how I grieved for all of those years that I was numb, that I was just trying to do my best to please people, to help people, to help myself, like to make it all okay. But when I actually created flow state in my body and actually met the density and the void, because it literally was felt right here in the center, everything shifted, everything transformed. So I'm going to leave you with one quote. It's not that it gets easier. It's that you get more powerful. And that is the key. You know, shiz is hitting the fan right now, is it not? In our world. And so all we have to do is stop, go into deep rest, breathe, receive, and stop, breathe, and receive is like my favorite mantra. But all of those little things that you do over time make you more powerful. So while everything else is kind of coming down around you, you recognize I am empowered. I am power, actually, and I am love. And so over time, when you give yourself what you need, that's where you heal. And that's where the permanent and lasting change comes in. And that's where you get out of numbness and you go into like, this is who I am. And this is my journey. And I'm going to experience and feel everything because that's why I'm here. I'm here to feel it all. And I'm not here to bypass. I'm here to deeply rest, nourish myself, feel, and then move to action. And so, yeah, that's all I have. I know we went a little bit over, but
thank you.